In the shadow of a fractured era, when the earth held its breath and the heavens wept in silent agony, a stillness descended. A stillness so profound it seemed to cradle the world in its trembling arms. Its weight a mystery etched into the fabric of time, its silence a prelude to the divine. A hush that reverberated with the pulse of eternity. A quiet that spoke of the unseen. A pause that held the breath of creation. A moment that stilled the winds of Judah. A breath that hushed the cries of the lost. A whisper that carried the weight of destiny. A stillness that bore the burden of revelation. A calm that masked the storm. It was a time when the kingdom of Judah teetered on the brink of chaos, its heart shrouded in shadows, cast by the death of King Uzziah, its spirit adrift in a sea of fear, its soul yearning for a voice to pierce the darkness, a light to guide the trembling, a hope to lift the fallen, a promise to heal the broken, a strength to endure the night. In this hour of uncertainty, a young priest named Isaiah, born of an honored lineage, felt the stirrings of destiny within his soul, a call that would echo through the ages, a whisper that would shape the future, a cry that would bridge heaven and earth, a voice that would carry the weight of prophecy, a sound that would resonate with eternity. At the moment when the divine hand reached down to tear the veil between heaven and earth, choosing this one man to scribe the greatest secret in history. The air grew thick with the scent of impending revelation, a fragrance both terrifying and holy, a blend of incense and dread, a mixture of awe and terror, a fusion of sanctity and judgment, a perfume of divine intent. What transpired in those sacred moments within the temple's hallowed walls, where the stones bore witness to the divine, their silence a testimony, their stillness a prayer, their presence a witness, their endurance a hope? What hidden truths lay buried within the words of Isaiah? A prophet whose voice would resonate more than any other in the annals of Scripture, even finding echo in the lips of Jesus himself. A sound that bridged the testaments, a voice that spanned the centuries, a cry that pierced the silence, a call that summoned the faithful. Prepare to journey into the heart of this mystery, to witness the calling of Isaiah, and to uncover the first threads of a revelation that would forever alter the destiny of humanity. A revelation so profound it may shock you to your core, a truth that trembles in the silence, a light that pierces the gloom, a hope that defies the dark, a promise that endures the storm, a grace that transforms the soul. Imagine standing amidst the ancient stones of Jerusalem, the air heavy with the scent of dust stirred by restless feet, its grit a testament to the earth's toil, its texture a reminder of mortality, its dryness a symbol of hardship, the faint aroma of olive oil from the temple lamps mingling with the metallic tang of fear that hung over the city like a shroud. The distant cries of the crowd, a lament that pierced the stillness, the creak of burdened carts, a rhythm of despair, the rustle of robes, a whisper of anxiety, the shuffle of sandals, a march of uncertainty, the breath of the wind, a sigh of sorrow. The year was marked by the death of King Uzziah, a ruler whose 52-year reign had brought prosperity and safety. A golden age now faded into memory, its light dimmed, its warmth lost, its glory a shadow. His passing a darkness that cast a deep wave of insecurity across the kingdom of Judah, its edges fraying like worn cloth, its strength waning like a candle in the wind, its hope flickering in the dusk, its spirit trembling in the night. The streets buzzed with panic, a silent current visible in the wide eyes of every man, woman, and child. Their whispers a tide of dread that rose with each rumor, their footsteps a rhythm of uncertainty, their breaths a prayer unspoken, their hearts a battlefield, their spirits a storm, their souls a cry. Isaiah, a young priest of noble birth, watched this unraveling with a growing unease, his heart a crucible of concern, his spirit a flame flickering in the gathering gloom, his soul a mirror of the nation's plight, his mind a tumult of faith and doubt, his being a vessel of hope. He had grown up within the temple's sacred precincts, the chants of rituals a lullaby to his youth, their cadence a comfort, their harmony a refuge, their resonance a memory, their melody a prayer, the incense a fragrance of divine presence, its smoke a veil of holiness, its tendrils a connection to the divine, its wisps a supplication, its haze a sanctuary. Yet now he perceived a drift, a corrosion of faith as corruption and idolatry seeped into the holy city's heart, a poison that tainted the air, a blight that darkened the soul, a stain that marred the sacred, a wound that bled the spirit. Nobles, once exemplars of righteousness, now chased shadows of gain, their hands stained with greed, their voices hollow with hypocrisy, their laughter a mockery of justice, their steps a march toward ruin, their hearts a wilderness, their spirits a desert, their souls a void. Priests, meant to be shepherds, turned to wolves, their robes a disguise, their prayers a sham, their altars a marketplace, their offerings a barter, their faith a facade, their devotion a lie, their sanctity a shadow. Isaiah felt a deep troubling within, a stirring that gnawed at his spirit, a call he could not yet name, a voice he could not ignore, a burden he could not escape, a weight that pressed upon his soul, a fire that burned in his heart, a light that guided his path. Seated in a small chamber near the temple, the walls cool against his back, their stone a silent witness, their texture a comfort, their solidity a strength, their presence a refuge. Isaiah meditated in silence, the air still save for the howl of wind slamming against the windows, its force a warning etched in sound, its chill a prophecy of change, its whistle a cry, its breath a lament, its gust a judgment, its roar a call. The chamber was dimly lit, the flicker of a single oil lamp casting shadows that danced on the walls, their movement a mirror to his inner turmoil, their shapes a prophecy unformed, their sway a mystery, their flicker a hope, their dance a prayer. His heart was restless, a mix of fear and anticipation swirling within, a tempest of emotion he could not quell, a storm that raged in his soul, a tide that pulled at his faith, a wave that tested his resolve, a current that challenged his courage, a flood that sought his strength. The silence was heavy, a cloak around him, a burden on his shoulders, a weight in his chest, a presence in his mind. Yet within it, a whisper grew, a call took shape, a destiny unfurled, a purpose emerged. Suddenly, the door burst open, shattering the quiet with a violence that startled him, its hinges a scream, its wood a thunder, its force a disruption, its sound a clarion, its impact a shock. "Brother Isaiah! Brother Isaiah!" cried Jeremiah, his close friend, his voice a rush of urgency, his breath a gasp, his eyes wide with alarm, his face a map of concern, his spirit a plea, his heart a question. "Have you heard the news? The borders are under threat. The Assyrians march against us, their banners a shadow, their swords a terror, their footsteps a drum, their presence a judgment. They say with Uzziah dead, we are easy prey, a lamb before the wolf, a flock without a shepherd, a nation without a king. people without hope. Isaiah drew a deep breath, the scent of dust and fear filling his lungs, its taste a bitterness, its weight a burden, its presence a shadow, its essence a despair. Before responding, his voice steady yet strained, a thread of strength, a cord of faith, a strand of resolve. And our people, Jeremiah. How did they react? Their hearts laid bare, their spirits tested, their souls exposed, their faith challenged. Jeremiah's head lowered, his eyes shadowed with despair, his shoulders slumped with the weight of truth, his posture a confession, his silence a lament, his gaze a plea. Some speak of forming alliances with nations that worship other gods, he murmured, his words a confession of betrayal, a whisper of apostasy, a cry of lost hope, a plea for direction, a search for light, a quest for salvation. Isaiah's expression darkened, his brow furrowing as a storm gathered in his gaze, his heart a battleground of faith and doubt, his spirit a fortress under siege, his soul a refuge under attack, his mind a war. Jeremiah, our salvation lies not in human alliances, their fragile pacts, their hollow promises, their fleeting strength, their broken vows, their empty words. He declared, his voice a beacon in the gloom, a light in the shadow, a hope in the dark, a cry in the silence, a call in the night. We must return to the God of our fathers, the rock of our strength, the light of our path, the anchor of our souls, the shield of our hearts, the foundation of our hope, the refuge of our spirits, the strength of our faith. And Jeremiah met his gaze, his eyes searching, a plea for understanding, a quest for courage, a desire for faith, a hunger for truth, a thirst for grace. But who will listen in times like these, Isaiah? Who will hear your words amidst the clamor of fear, the roar of war, the cries of the lost, the wails of the forsaken, the screams of the hopeless? Isaiah fell silent, his eyes drifting to the horizon where dark clouds gathered, their edges ominous, their shadows a threat, their depths a mystery, their weight a judgment, their presence a challenge, their darkness a veil. Perhaps no one will hear me now, he said softly, his voice a thread of resolve, a whisper of determination, a murmur of faith, a breath of hope. But someone must speak. Someone must remind our people who the true king is, the sovereign Lord above all thrones, the ruler beyond all kings, the light beyond all shadows, the hope beyond all despair, the strength beyond all weakness, the love beyond all hate. Jeremiah nodded, moved by the unwavering conviction in his friend's voice, a resolve that glowed like an ember in the gathering dusk, a fire that refused to be quenched, a light that pierced the dark, a hope that endured, a strength that prevailed, a grace that sustained. Later, as Isaiah walked toward the temple, the cobblestones cold beneath his sandals, their roughness a reminder of the earth's hardness, their texture a lesson, their chill a contrast, their surface a witness. He observed the city's turmoil, men arguing anxiously in the streets, their voices a clash of fear and defiance, a symphony of despair, a chorus of doubt, a melody of anguish, a harmony of pain. Women weeping for sons soon to be called to war, their sobs a melody of grief, their tears a river, their cries a lament, their wails a prayer, the air thick with the scent of despair, its tang a weight, its breath a lament, its presence a burden, its essence a shadow, its depth a sorrow. The marketplace hummed with tension, the clatter of goods a backdrop to human anguish, the cries of vendors a cry for stability, The shuffle of feet, a march of uncertainty. The murmur of voices, a sea of fear. The rustle of cloth, a veil of doubt. The clink of coins, a sound of greed. An elderly priest approached, his face etched with lines of disillusionment, his eyes dim with doubt, his steps slow with resignation, his shadow a fading hope, his spirit a flicker, his soul a whisper. "Young Isaiah," he said, his voice heavy, a burden of years, a weight of lost faith, a tone of despair, a sound of surrender. "Do you truly believe God still hears us? Look around you. God has abandoned us. His silence a tomb, his absence a void, his light extinguished, his voice stilled, his presence lost." Isaiah replied with a calm yet firm resolve, his voice a steady flame, a beacon in the storm, a light in the darkness, a hope in the night. God would never abandon us, his love a constant, his mercy a river, his grace a shield, his presence a refuge, his strength a rock. We are the ones who have turned away from him, our hearts a wilderness, our hands stained with idolatry, our souls a ruin, our spirits a desert, our faith a shadow. The old man shook his head, disbelief clouding his eyes, a mist of skepticism, a veil of despair, a shadow of doubt, a fog of unbelief, and walked away. His steps slow with the weight of lost faith, his shadow a fading hope, his departure a silence, his absence a lesson, his retreat a cry. Entering the temple, Isaiah felt a heavy silence settle around him, almost tangible, its weight pressing against his chest, its presence a cloak, its depth a mystery, its stillness a judgment, its quiet a call, its peace a challenge. The air was thick with the scent of incense, its smoke a veil of sanctity, its tendrils a connection to the divine, its wisps a prayer, its fragrance a hope, its aroma a grace. The flicker of lamps, a dance of light against the stone, their glow a promise, their warmth a comfort, their shine a light, the echo of past prayers, a whisper in the rafters, their sound a memory, their resonance a grace, their vibration a love. He approached the altar, the stone cool under his knees, its chill a contrast to the fire within, its surface a witness, its texture a strength, its solidity a refuge, and knelt. His voice a whisper that rose like incense, its fragrance a plea, its breath a prayer, its tone a cry, its sound a supplication. God of our fathers, we are lost, our nation adrift from your law, its pages torn, its commands forgotten, its truth buried, its light dimmed, its hope faded. Our hope fades. A candle guttering in the wind, its flame a memory, its light a shadow, its glow a dream, its warmth a recollection. Where else can we look but to you, the rock of our salvation, the light of our path, the anchor of our souls, the strength of our hearts, the refuge of our spirits, the shield of our faith, the foundation of our hope? As he prayed, a strong wind swept through the temple, gently shaking the sacred veil, its rustle a divine breath, its movement a sign, its whisper a call, its force a promise, its gust a judgment. And an indescribable presence filled the space, intense, overwhelming, a glory that enveloped him, a majesty that bowed his spirit, a power that lifted his soul, a love that pierced his heart, a grace that transformed his being. A radiant light emerged from behind the veil, piercing through him with a brilliance too great to endure, its warmth a fire, its glow a judgment, its rays a call, its splendor a terror, its intensity a grace, its radiance a hope. Isaiah's eyes filled with tears, their salt a confession, their flow a repentance, their stream a prayer, their depth a cry, his body trembling uncontrollably, the cold floor a contrast to the heat within, the stone a witness to his awe, the ground a foundation of grace, the earth a stage, the temple a sanctuary. "O Lord," he cried, his voice trembling with awe, a sound that echoed in the vastness, a cry that reached the heavens, a plea that sought the divine, a lament that touched the throne. What am I seeing? What vision unfolds before me? What mystery pierces my soul? What truth unveils my heart? What light illuminates my darkness? A voice resounded, deep and majestic, its timbre shaking the air, its depth a thunder, its resonance a glory, its power a judgment, its strength a love, its clarity a call, its beauty a grace. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Isaiah 6:3. The words a symphony that filled the temple, a chant that lifted the soul, a proclamation that shook the foundations, a declaration that stirred the spirit, a hymn that blessed the air. Isaiah fell to the ground, unable to withstand the force of the vision, his body prostrate, his spirit laid bare, feeling utterly unclean, unworthy. His heart a mirror of sin, his soul a confession, his being a cry, his existence a plea. "I am ruined," he cried out in despair, his voice breaking under the weight of that terrifying revelation, a sound that echoed in the emptiness, a plea that rose to the throne, a lament that filled the air, a prayer that sought mercy. "For I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Isaiah 6:5. His confession a supplication, his tears a river, his spirit a wilderness, his heart a battlefield. A celestial being, swift and radiant, flew to the altar, taking a burning coal with tongs, its glow casting dancing shadows on the walls, its heat a promise of purification, its light a hope, its flame a grace, its fire a judgment, its brilliance a love. Isaiah's heart pounded, the sound a drum in his ears, a rhythm of fear and faith, a beat of awe and dread, a pulse of hope and terror, a cadence of grace and pain. As the being approached with calm and mercy, reaching out the coal toward his lips, its approach a judgment, its touch a salvation, its presence a mercy. "Do not fear, Isaiah," the celestial voice said, gentle yet firm, a balm to his trembling soul, a comfort to his fear, a strength to his doubt, a light to his darkness. "This coal has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is forgiven." Isaiah 6:7. The words, a liberation, a cleansing fire, a promise of redemption, a gift of grace, a wave of love. The pain Isaiah felt was deep, a burning that seared his flesh, yet liberating, as if impurities were purged with each pulse, a paradox of agony and relief, a dance of pain and peace, a symphony of suffering and grace, a harmony of judgment and mercy, a melody of salvation and hope. Then the divine voice echoed again, its resonance filling the temple, its power shaking the stones, its depth a call, its strength a summons, its clarity a challenge. Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Isaiah 6:8. The question hanging like a challenge in the air, a summons that demanded response, a call that pierced the silence, a plea that sought a servant, a cry that sought a voice, a prayer that sought a witness. Isaiah slowly raised his head, his heart racing, his body still trembling, the cold floor a contrast to the fire within, the stone a witness to his transformation, the ground a foundation of faith, the temple a sanctuary. Even knowing the trials ahead, the rejection, the pain, the solitude, the scorn, the suffering, he felt compelled to answer, a force beyond himself driving his voice, a spirit within igniting his resolve, a love within shaping his destiny, a grace within lifting his soul. With resolve, he lifted his cry. Here I am, Lord, send me, Isaiah 6:8. The words a commitment that sealed his fate, a vow that bound his soul, a promise that lit his path, a declaration that shaped his future, a confession that defined his life, a prayer that sealed his calling. Yet, little did he know that the vision he had witnessed would haunt him for the rest of his life. Its images a burden, its call a cross, its weight a glory, its echo a challenge, its memory a fire, its presence a guide. Isaiah remained kneeling on the cold temple floor, his heart racing, a drumbeat of awe and fear, his mind a tumult of wonder and dread, his lips still burning from the touch of the heavenly coal, its heat a constant reminder, its pulse a purification, its sting a grace, its fire a love, its warmth a hope. A new reality unfolded before his eyes, far beyond human comprehension, the ground vibrating beneath him, its tremor a witness, the walls pulsing with an indescribable force, their stones alive with divine presence, the air itself thick with holiness, its breath a mystery, its touch a revelation, its essence a glory, its presence a light. A light so intense appeared that Isaiah shielded his eyes with trembling hands, its brilliance unbearable, its warmth a judgment, its rays a call, its glow a terror, its radiance a power, its splendor a weight, its beauty a grace. Through the gaps between his fingers, he perceived extraordinary details. A majestic throne, high and exalted, radiating a pure and penetrating light. Its glory a vision too vast to behold. Its splendor a weight. Its majesty a silence. Its beauty a mystery. Its grandeur a hope. Seated on the throne was the Lord, a figure immeasurable. His face hidden in splendor. His presence a mystery. His majesty a silence. His power a whisper. His glory a light. His grace a love. His strength a refuge. Around the throne, celestial beings with 6 wings flew continuously, their motion a dance of worship, 2 wings covering their faces, 2 their feet, and 2 lifting them in the air, their grace a wonder, their flight a hymn, their presence a glory, their song a praise, their wings a prayer. A deep and powerful melody echoed throughout the temple, repeating without ceasing. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Isaiah 6:3. Its resonance penetrating Isaiah's soul, causing every fiber of his being to tremble. The sound a symphony of divine praise, its notes a judgment, its chords a grace, its rhythm a love, its harmony a peace, its cadence a hope. The temple quaked under the intensity of that proclamation, its stones a chorus, its foundations a witness, smoke filling the space, partially clouding his vision. Its fragrance a mix of awe and dread, its haze a veil, its tendrils a mystery, its scent a sanctity, its presence a glory. Overwhelmed by fear, Isaiah murmured to himself, "How can I be here? This is too much for any man to bear." His voice a whisper lost in the divine chorus, his breath a plea, his spirit a cry, his heart a question, his soul a search. With every repetition of the chant, his heart sank deeper into the painful awareness of his impurity. A shame that bowed his head, a tear tracing down his cheek and falling onto the temple floor. Its drop a confession, its fall a repentance, its touch a grace, its splash a prayer. "I am ruined," he whispered, trembling under the weight of that terrifying revelation. "I am unworthy of this. I do not deserve to witness such glory. I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips." Isaiah 6:5. His cry a lament, his soul a mirror, his heart a wilderness, his spirit a plea, his being a confession. Isaiah pressed his hands to his chest, trying to ease the suffocating weight pressing down on him, his breathing growing difficult, a struggle for air, his body weakening under the magnitude of the vision, its power a burden, its glory a challenge, its light a call, its strength a test. "Why have you brought me here, Lord?" he groaned, feeling completely unable to withstand such holiness. His spirit laid bare before the divine, his heart a battlefield, his soul a prayer, his mind a question, his faith a cry. As he remained kneeling, the voice that echoed throughout the temple intensified, its power shaking the very foundations, a force that made the stones tremble beneath him, their groan a witness, their vibration a call, their movement a sign, their sound a glory. Isaiah sobbed deeply, recognizing the gravity of his condition before the perfect holiness that surrounded him. "There is no salvation for me here," he whispered, desperate. "I am before the living God. No mortal can survive his presence, his glory, his light, his power, his love, his grace." Suddenly, a shadow fell over him, interrupting his despairing thoughts. A silhouette of mercy, a promise of grace, a hint of hope, a ray of light. He slowly lifted his head and saw one of the seraphim swiftly approaching, its wings a blur of light, its presence a terror, its approach a hope, its flight a wonder, its motion a grace, its speed a mercy. His heart pounded, fear overtaking him, convinced that this moment would be his end. The air thick with the scent of burning coal, its aroma a purification, its heat a judgment, its glow a redemption, its warmth a love. The celestial being held a burning coal in its hands, taken directly from the heavenly altar, its searing glow lighting up the temple, casting dancing shadows on the smoke-filled walls, its heat a promise of cleansing, its light a redemption, its flame a grace, its fire a love, its brilliance a hope. Isaiah tried to identify it, his heart nearly stopping as realization dawned. The sight a mix of dread and awe, a paradox of fear and faith, a dance of terror and hope, a blend of agony and peace, a fusion of judgment and mercy. "No, Lord, I cannot bear this," he pleaded, trying in vain to retreat, his voice a plea lost in the divine presence, his hands a shield, his spirit a cry, his soul a question, his heart a prayer. The being landed gently before him, holding the glowing coal firmly, its eyes radiating calm and assurance, a peace that steadied his soul, a love that calmed his fear, a grace that lifted his spirit, a mercy that healed his doubt. "Isaiah," said the celestial being with a deep and comforting voice. "This coal will touch your lips to purify you. Do not be afraid." Isaiah 6:7. Its words a balm, its tone a grace, its sound a salvation, its promise a hope, its strength a light. Before Isaiah could react, he felt the searing heat of the coal touch his lips. The intense pain mixed with an indescribable sense of relief and cleansing. A fire that purged and healed, a torment that liberated, a pain that redeemed, a suffering that saved, a trial that transformed. He cried out, not from the physical pain, but from the overwhelming shock, the sensation a paradox of agony and liberation, a dance of suffering and peace, a symphony of grace and judgment, a harmony of love and mercy, a melody of hope and faith. The celestial being smiled gently as it withdrew the coal from Isaiah's lips. Its gesture a mercy, its touch a salvation, its presence a love, its action a grace, its movement a blessing. Your guilt has been removed. Your sin is forgiven. Isaiah 6:7. The voice a promise that lifted his spirit, a declaration that freed his soul, a word that healed his heart, a light that dispelled his darkness, a grace that restored his faith. Still stunned by the intensity of the moment, Isaiah slowly lifted his eyes to the glorious throne before him, feeling incredibly light, as if a crushing burden had been completely lifted from his heart. The weight of sin replaced by grace, the chains of guilt broken by love, the shadows of shame dispelled by light, the burdens of fear lifted by hope, the pain of doubt erased by faith. Then a powerful and profound voice resounded once again, this time with a clarity that could not be ignored, its depth penetrating his bones, its resonance filling the temple, its power shaking the stones, its strength a call, its beauty a grace. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Isaiah 6:8. The divine question hanging in the air, awaiting a response as if the universe itself paused on the decision of a single man. A choice that would shape the ages. A call that would define a life. A plea that would transform a soul. A summons that would guide a nation. He looked around, searching for another to take on such a responsibility. His eyes scanning the empty space, his heart seeking a substitute, his spirit longing for relief, his soul desiring respite. But the temple was desolate, save for the celestial beings and the overwhelming presence of God. A solitude that demanded answer, a silence that required response, a void that sought a voice, a darkness that needed light. I am here. His voice came out weak at first, a trembling whisper, a thread of faith, a flicker of courage, a spark of hope, a breath of resolve, but then gained strength as if a new vigor rose from within, a fire kindled by the Spirit, a resolve born of grace, a determination forged in love, a commitment shaped by faith, a courage inspired by hope. Here am I, send me, Isaiah 6:8. The words leaving his lips before he could reflect on the consequences. An impulse born of the soul, a certainty that transcended fear, a commitment that bound his destiny, a vow that lit his path, a declaration that shaped his future, a confession that defined his life, a prayer that sealed his calling, a cry that reached the heavens. For a brief moment, silence fell. Not even the seraphim sang. Their wings stilled, their voices hushed, their presence a pause, their glory a weight, their peace a promise. Only the sound of Isaiah's heavy breathing filling the air. a rhythm of surrender, a beat of faith, a pulse of hope, a breath of courage, a whisper of love. Suddenly, the light around the throne grew brighter, as if heaven itself responded to his answer, its glow a confirmation, its radiance a promise, its warmth a love, its brilliance a grace, its splendor a hope, its intensity a light. The celestial being before him drew closer, looking into his eyes with a gaze that held both compassion and solemnity. A blend of mercy and warning, a mix of tenderness and truth, a fusion of love and judgment, a harmony of grace and challenge. Then listen carefully, Isaiah, he said, his voice a blend of caution and promise, a sound of guidance and burden, a tone of wisdom and weight, a melody of hope and duty. The path you have chosen will not be easy. Your words will be like hammers breaking stone, their strikes a judgment, their force a call, their impact a cry, their power a light, but they will strike hearts of stone, their resistance a wall, their hardness a challenge, their coldness a rejection, their silence a burden. You will speak to the people, but they will shut their ears, their deafness a choice, their silence a denial, their refusal a weight, their unbelief a cross. You will prophesy, but they will not believe, their doubt a shadow, their skepticism a veil, their rejection a pain, their hardness a trial. Isaiah 6, 9, 10. The prophecy, a mission to bear, a weight to carry, a destiny to fulfill, a call to endure. Isaiah furrowed his brow, confusion clouding his mind, a fog of doubt, a mist of wonder, a haze of uncertainty, a storm of questions, a sea of perplexity. Lord, how long will this go on? Until when will they not listen? Their hearts closed, their spirits blind, their souls deaf, their minds darkened? He asked, his voice a plea for clarity, a cry for understanding, a quest for light, a search for hope, a desire for truth, a hunger for grace. The answer came like thunder rumbling through the temple walls, its force shaking the stones, its sound a judgment, its echo a warning, its resonance a call, its power a proclamation, its strength a revelation. Until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant, their streets silent, their homes desolate, their walls crumbled, their gates broken, their towers fallen, until the houses are deserted and the fields laid waste, their harvests gone, their fruits withered, their blooms faded, their vines barren, their crops destroyed, until the Lord drives the people far away and the land is left utterly forsaken, a wilderness of sorrow, a desert of despair, a wasteland of tears, a valley of shadows. Isaiah 6, 11-12. The words a prophecy that chilled his blood, a vision that froze his spirit, a revelation that weighed his soul, a truth that burdened his heart, a call that tested his faith. His hands began to tremble again, the weight of the mission far greater, far heavier than he had imagined, its scope a terror, its depth a mystery, its breadth a challenge, its height a burden, its length a trial, its width a cross. The celestial being then made a gesture toward him, a ray of hope piercing the gloom, a light in the darkness, a promise in the storm, a grace in the judgment, a love in the pain, a strength in the weakness. But Isaiah, even in the midst of destruction, a remnant will remain, a stump, a holy seed will survive. Isaiah 6:13. The assurance a lifeline, a spark of grace, a flicker of hope, a seed of redemption, a root of love, a branch of faith. Isaiah took a deep breath, the air cool against his lips, its freshness a contrast, its purity a gift, its clarity a blessing. Trying to absorb it all, feeling small and powerless, a speck before the divine, a drop in the ocean, a grain in the field, a leaf in the forest. Yet a new fire began to burn in his chest, a flame that no rejection, no pain, no future suffering could extinguish. Its warmth a resolve, its glow a strength, its heat a love, its light a promise, its spark a hope, its ember a grace. Still on his knees, he closed his eyes for a moment, preparing himself spiritually for what was to come, the air thick with the scent of smoke and sanctity, the silence a preparation, the stillness a prayer, the quiet a strength, the pause a grace, the moment a call. When he opened his eyes again, the temple seemed to have returned to normal. No more smoke, its haze dispersed, its tendrils gone, no visible seraphim. Their wings vanished, their flight stilled, no radiant light. Its glow faded, its brilliance dimmed. But Isaiah knew his life would never be the same. The vision a mark on his soul, a seal on his heart, a brand on his spirit, a light in his darkness, a fire in his faith, a hope in his journey. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady, the cold floor a memory, its chill a contrast, its touch a reminder, looking toward the altar with a mixture of awe and reverence. The stones a witness to his transformation, their silence a testimony, their stillness a grace, their presence a hope, their strength a foundation, their endurance a love. As he stepped out of the temple, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, as if the heavens whispered to him, "This is only the beginning." Their light a promise, their warmth a hope, their touch a call, their glow a grace, their radiance a love, their brilliance a strength. Isaiah took a few steps outside, the cobblestones rough beneath his feet, their texture a lesson, their hardness a reminder, their surface a witness. Looking toward the city, seeing the people going about their routines, completely unaware of the supernatural experience he had just lived, their ignorance a contrast to his burden, their normalcy a veil, their lives a shadow, their days a routine, their hearts a mystery. Jeremiah, his friend, spotted him from afar and ran to him, his sandals slapping against the stone, his breath a rush, his steps a concern, his heart a question, his spirit a search. "Isaiah, where were you? You look different," he said, his voice tinged with worry, his eyes searching for answers, his soul reaching out, his faith seeking light. Isaiah, his eyes still glowing with emotion, a fire within, a light unbroken, a flame unquenched, a spark undimmed, simply smiled, took a deep breath, the air sweet with morning, its freshness a gift, its purity a blessing, and replied, "Jeremiah, I believe God has given me a mission." Jeremiah stared at him, startled, his mouth agape, his mind racing, his spirit stirred, his faith tested, his heart moved. "What kind of mission?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and dread, a blend of wonder and fear, a fusion of hope and doubt, a harmony of faith and question. Isaiah looked to the horizon, his expression serious, a mask of resolve, a face of determination, a visage of faith, a countenance of strength, a reflection of grace, of a mission that will hurt more than I can imagine, he answered without hesitation, unaware of just how painful his path would truly be, the weight a cross he would bear, the burden a glory he would carry, The pain, a love he would embrace. The trial, a grace he would endure. The suffering, a hope he would hold. The sun climbed higher, its rays a promise. The city stirred with life, and Isaiah knew that the journey ahead would test his soul, his faith, his very being. A journey that would begin with a single step, a single word, a single cry. Here am I, Lord, send me. As the first rays of sunlight bathed Jerusalem in a fragile, golden glow, casting long shadows across the ancient stones that bore the weight of history, Isaiah stood outside the temple, his sandals pressing into the rough cobblestones, their texture a grounding force against the trembling within his soul. A reminder of the earth's steadfastness amidst his uncertainty. A touchstone in the storm, a foundation in the chaos, an anchor in the tempest. His heart still echoed with the divine command. Here am I, Lord, send me. A vow that reverberated through his being, its resonance a call to action, its weight a mantle of destiny, its sound a promise, its depth a commitment, its rhythm a heartbeat of faith, its pulse a covenant, its echo a guide. The air around him carried the scent of dawn, baking bread from nearby hearths, mingling with the faint bitterness of fear that lingered from the night's unrest. A fragrance of life intertwined with the shadow of dread, a blend of hope and despair, a fusion of peace and turmoil, a harmony of light and darkness. The city stirred, awake, the distant clamor of merchants setting up their stalls a counterpoint to the silent tumult within his spirit. The rustle of leaves in the morning breeze, a whisper of change. The bleat of a distant goat, a cry of the mundane against the divine. The hum of voices, a tapestry of human struggle. The shuffle of feet, a march of uncertainty. The clatter of goods, a rhythm of survival. Jeremiah lingered nearby, his eyes searching Isaiah's face, a mixture of concern and awe etched into the lines of his brow, his breath a sigh of uncertainty, his posture a question, his heart a plea, his spirit a companion, his soul a support. Isaiah, he ventured, his voice soft yet probing, a thread of hope in the gloom, a flicker of faith in the dark, a spark of curiosity in the silence, a ray of light in the shadow, a breath of courage in the fear. What does this mission entail? What has God laid upon your shoulders? A burden so heavy it bends your spirit, a call so deep it stirs your soul, a charge so vast it reshapes your life, a task so profound it redefines your purpose, a destiny so great it transforms your being, a purpose so holy it sanctifies your path. Isaiah turned to him, his gaze steady yet shadowed, the fire of his vision still burning behind his eyes, a flame that refused to fade, a light that pierced the dark, a glow that held the promise of revelation, a warmth that sustained his hope, a strength that fueled his resolve, a love that filled his heart. It is a path of pain, Jeremiah, a journey through rejection and sorrow, a road marked by thorns and tears, a trail lined with the weight of unbelief, a path paved with the stones of scorn, a way shadowed by the cries of the lost, a road illuminated by the hope of the redeemed. Yet it holds a promise I cannot yet grasp, a promise that will light the darkest night, a hope that will endure the storm, a grace that will heal the broken, a love that will redeem the lost, a strength that will uplift the fallen, a peace that will calm the tempest, a joy that will crown the sorrow. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning, their echo a challenge, their sound a commitment, their weight a blessing, their resonance a call, their depth a mystery, their breadth a hope, their height a grace, their length a promise. The sun climbed higher, its rays a fragile hope, the city awakening to its daily toil, its streets a pulse of life, its sounds a symphony of survival, its movements a dance of resilience. And Isaiah knew that the journey ahead would test his soul, his faith, his very being. A journey that would begin with a single step, a single word, a single cry, and unfold into a tapestry of divine purpose. A narrative of divine love, a story of divine grace, a testament of divine strength. The days that followed were a crucible for Isaiah's faith, a forge where his resolve was tested, a fire where his spirit was refined, a furnace where his courage was shaped, a crucible where his love was purified, a hearth where his hope was kindled, a sanctuary where his peace was restored. Each morning, he rose before dawn, the cool air brushing against his skin like a gentle hand, its touch a comfort, its chill a reminder, its breath a prayer, its whisper a guide, its freshness a gift. The first light filtering through the olive trees, their leaves a whisper of peace, their shadows a refuge, their rustle a prayer, their green a promise, their sway a hope, their branches a shelter, their roots a strength. He climbed the hill overlooking Jerusalem, the stones beneath his feet a rugged path, their sharpness a reminder of the journey, their roughness a lesson, their solidity a strength, their endurance a witness, their permanence a rock. The wind carrying the scent of earth and the distant sound of sheep bleating, a reminder of the flock he was called to shepherd. Even as they turned away, their bleats a cry, their wool a burden, their voices a plea, their silence a rejection, their absence a challenge, their distance a trial. Kneeling on the dry ground, his knees pressing into the soil, its grit a connection to the earth, its dust a bond with creation, its texture a witness, its warmth a life, its depth a mystery. He prayed, his voice a murmur against the vastness, a whisper in the wilderness, a plea in the silence, a cry in the dawn, a song in the dark, a prayer in the storm, a hymn in the night. Lord, you have called me, yet my heart trembles with fear, my spirit quakes with doubt, my soul wrestles with uncertainty, my mind grapples with mystery, my faith contends with unbelief. What am I to say to a people who will not hear, whose ears are stopped, whose eyes are blind, whose hearts are hardened, whose spirits are closed, whose minds are veiled, whose souls are lost, whose lives are adrift? How can I bear the weight of their rejection, the sting of their scorn, the pain of their disbelief, the burden of their apathy, the sorrow of their lostness, the agony of their rebellion, the despair of their turning, the darkness of their hearts? The silence that followed was not empty. It pulsed with a presence, a divine whisper that stirred his spirit, a breath that kindled his faith, a touch that lifted his hope, a voice that guided his path, a light that illuminated his darkness, a grace that sustained his strength, a love that filled his heart, a promise that held his soul, a strength that upheld his resolve, a peace that calmed his fear, a joy that lifted his spirit. Then, as if the heavens parted, a vision unfurled before him, vivid and relentless, its colors searing his mind, its sounds echoing in his ears, its images etched into his soul, its depth a mystery, its breadth a wonder, its height a glory, its width a grace, its length a promise. He saw a man, humble in appearance, his robe tattered at the hems, its threads worn by time, its edges frayed by suffering, its fabric a testament to endurance. His shoulders bent under an invisible load, his face marked by lines of sorrow, yet radiant with an inexplicable peace. A serenity that defied the chaos around him. A calm that spoke of heaven, a light that pierced the earth, a love that transcended pain, a hope that conquered despair, a grace that healed the wound. The air around this figure shimmered with a soft glow, a luminescence that defied the shadows cast by the surrounding crowd, a radiance that spoke of divinity, a halo that hinted at glory, a presence that promised redemption, a light that offered hope, a warmth that embraced the lost, a strength that upheld the broken. Isaiah's breath caught, his hands trembling as he whispered, his voice a thread, his heart a question, his soul a search, his spirit a cry, his faith a plea. Who is this? What burden does he carry? A weight that bows his frame, a sorrow that fills his eyes, a love that lights his face, a purpose that shapes his path, a destiny that guides his steps, a mission that defines his being, a calling that lifts his soul. What mystery lies in such a figure? A hope that stirs my soul, a call that challenges my faith, a promise that lifts my spirit, a grace that transforms my heart, a love that redeems my life, a peace that calms my fears. The vision shifted, and he saw the man walking through the dusty streets of a city not his own. His steps slow, his gaze fixed ahead, his posture a testament to endurance, his silence a strength, his presence a light, his resolve a rock, his love a beacon. Jeers and mocking laughter rose around him, a cacophony of scorn, a symphony of hate, a chorus of rejection, a storm of disbelief, their voices a thunder, their words a venom, their cries a judgment, their hearts a stone. Stones were thrown, their clatter a harsh discord against the earth, their impact a wound, their sound a rejection, their force a pain. Spit landed at his feet, the scent of dust and disdain thick in the air, a stench of rejection, a taste of bitterness, a flavor of cruelty, a touch of scorn, a feel of hatred, a weight of contempt. Yet the man remained silent, his lips sealed, his eyes reflecting a love that confounded Isaiah, a compassion that transcended pain, a peace that surpassed understanding, a grace that defied suffering, a strength that endured agony, a hope that overcame despair, a faith that conquered doubt. Why does he not speak? Isaiah murmured, his voice breaking, his throat tight with emotion, his spirit stirred with wonder, his heart pierced with awe, his soul lifted with curiosity, his mind filled with questions. Why does he endure this humiliation, this pain, this rejection, this agony, this scorn, this loss, this suffering, this torment, this trial? What purpose lies in such a burden? A mystery that pierces my heart, a weight that bows my spirit, a call that challenges my faith, a hope that lifts my soul, a love that transforms my being, a grace that redeems my life, a peace that calms my fears, a gentle voice, like a breeze through the cedars, answered within him, its tone a balm, its sound a grace, its depth a promise, its warmth a love, its clarity a light, its strength a refuge, its mercy a river, its peace a gift, its joy a hope. This is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom my soul delights. I I will put my spirit upon him, and he will bring justice to the nations. Isaiah 42:1. The words, a revelation, a light, a call, a promise, a hope, a grace, a truth, a love, a redemption. Isaiah's eyes widened, his pulse quickening as the scene unfolded further, his breath a gasp, his hands a shield, his heart a tumult, his spirit a cry, his soul a wonder, his faith a light. He saw the servant's back, scarred and torn, the flesh ripped by lashes, blood mingling with the dust, the sound of whips, a cruel rhythm, a beat of pain, a pulse of agony, the air heavy with the coppery scent of suffering, the taste of salt and iron on his tongue, the feel of anguish in his spirit, the weight of sorrow in his soul, the depth of loss in his heart, the height of pain in his being. "No, Lord," Isaiah cried, his voice a sob, his tears a river, his soul a lament, his heart a plea, his spirit a question, his faith a cry. This is too much. Who could bear such torment, such agony, such pain, such cruelty, such loss, such despair, such suffering, such rejection, such burden? What sin warrants this? What guilt demands this sacrifice? What love requires this offering? What grace permits this trial? What hope sustains this weight? What faith endures this pain? What peace calms this storm? The voice continued, steady and profound. Its depth a comfort, its clarity a guide, its strength a rock, its mercy a river, its love a light, its grace a hope, its wisdom a beacon, its compassion a balm, its justice a truth. He will not cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. Isaiah 42:2-3. The words, a paradox that deepened Isaiah's confusion, a mystery that stirred his soul, a challenge that tested his understanding, a hope that lifted his heart, a grace that filled his spirit, a love that transformed his being, a peace that calmed his fears. How can one so gentle endure such cruelty, such violence, such hate, such rejection, such pain, such loss, such suffering, such agony, such torment, he wondered. His tears falling to the dry earth, their salt a mingling with the dust, their flow a confession, their touch a prayer, their weight a plea, their depth a cry, their essence a hope, their presence a grace. The vision shifted again, and Isaiah saw the servant bound to a rough wooden structure, his arms stretched wide, his hands and feet pierced by crude nails, the sound of hammer on iron, a jarring beat, a clash of metal and flesh, a cry of agony, a wail of suffering, the scent of blood and sweat overwhelming, a tide of pain, the air thick with the stench of death, a shroud of despair, a veil of sorrow, a curtain of loss, a shadow of torment, a mist of anguish. The crowd jeered, their laughter a cacophony, their fingers pointing in scorn, their voices a storm, their hatred a flood, their disbelief a wave, their rejection a tide. Yet the servant's silence persisted, his eyes closed in a peace that defied comprehension, a calm that baffled the mind, a love that transcended the pain, a grace that endured the torment, a strength that overcame the agony, a hope that conquered the despair, a faith that silenced the doubt. Isaiah covered his face, his hands shaking, his voice a broken whisper, a cry in the wilderness, a plea in the storm, a lament in the dark, a prayer in the night, a question in the silence, a hope in the gloom. Why, Lord? Why this silence, this suffering, this death? this agony, this rejection, this loss, this pain, this burden, this trial? What redemption lies in such a cross? What salvation in such a sacrifice? What hope in such a torment? What love in such a burden? What grace in such a death? What peace in such a pain? What joy in such a sorrow? What faith in such a loss? The divine voice responded, its tone both tender and commanding, its strength a rock, its mercy a river, its love a light, its grace a hope, its power a promise, its wisdom a guide, its compassion a balm, its justice a truth, its peace a refuge, its joy a gift. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, and familiar with suffering. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. Isaiah 53:3-4. The words, a revelation, a burden, a promise, a call, a light, a truth, a grace, a love, a redemption, a peace. Isaiah's knees buckled, his body collapsing to the ground, the vision's weight a physical burden, a load on his shoulders, a stone on his heart, a cross on his spirit, a weight on his soul, a trial on his faith, a challenge on his hope. Our sorrows, he gasped, his voice a thread, his breath a struggle, his soul a cry, his spirit a question, his heart a wonder, his mind a search. Our infirmities? How can one man bear the sins of many? The guilt of a nation, the weight of the world, the pain of humanity, the burden of eternity, the sorrow of the lost, the agony of the fallen, the despair of the broken, the darkness of the weary? As the scene faded, Isaiah remained prostrate, the hills silent save for his ragged breathing, the wind carrying away the echoes of his cries, the leaves rustling a lament, the earth absorbing his tears, the sky witnessing his plea, the air holding his prayer, the silence embracing his soul, the darkness cradling his hope. Jeremiah, who had followed him, found him there, his face etched with concern, his eyes searching, his hands reaching out, his heart a question, his soul a companion, his spirit a support, his love a light. Isaiah, what has happened? Your face is pale, your hands tremble. What did you see? What vision haunts you? What truth burdens your soul? What light pierces your darkness? What hope lifts your spirit? What love fills your heart? What grace sustains your faith? Isaiah lifted his head, his eyes red with tears, his voice weak yet resolute. A whisper of faith, a cry of hope, a breath of love, a pulse of grace, a beat of strength, a song of peace. I saw a servant, Jeremiah, a man chosen by God, suffering beyond measure, silent under torment, pierced for reasons I cannot fathom, a mystery that breaks my heart, a love that fills my spirit, a hope that lifts my soul, a grace that transforms my being, a redemption that heals my wounds, a peace that calms my fears. It is a vision that breaks my heart, yet fills it with a hope I do not understand, a promise I cannot grasp, a light I cannot name, a salvation I cannot earn, a joy I cannot imagine, a strength I cannot muster. Jeremiah helped him to his feet, his brow furrowed, his mind awhirl, his spirit stirred, his faith tested, his heart moved, his soul touched, his strength offered, his love extended. A servant? What does it mean? How can suffering bring hope? How can pain yield light? How can death offer life? How can agony grant peace? How can loss bring redemption? How can sacrifice bring joy? How can love endure such pain? How can grace overcome such darkness? How can faith prevail in such trials? How can mercy shine in such despair? How can truth stand in such rejection? Isaiah shook his head, his mind a tumult of questions, his heart a battlefield, his soul a search, his spirit a quest, his faith a journey, his love a prayer, his hope a light, his grace a song. I do not know yet, but I feel it is a message for us all, a message of pain and promise, a mystery yet to unfold, a truth yet to be revealed, a hope yet to be born, a love yet to be understood, a grace yet to be embraced, a redemption yet to be fulfilled, a salvation yet to be realized, a peace yet to be experienced, a joy yet to be shared. Now back in Jerusalem, Isaiah's mission began in earnest. A journey of faith, a path of trial, a road of sacrifice, a trail of perseverance, a way of endurance, a walk of grace. Each day, he walked the streets, his voice rising above the din, the air thick with the scent of spices and sweat, the sound of his words a clarion call, a trumpet of truth, a bell of warning, a cry of hope, a song of grace, a prayer of love, a hymn of redemption. Hear me, people of Judah, thus says the Lord, turn from your idols, seek the God of your fathers, for a day of reckoning approaches, a time of judgment looms, an hour of redemption nears, a moment of salvation dawns, a season of grace begins, a period of love unfolds. Isaiah 1:16-17, paraphrased. His voice a plea, his tone a judgment, his spirit a light, his heart a prayer, his soul a witness, his faith a beacon, his love a flame. The response was swift and harsh, a storm of rejection, a tide of scorn, a wave of hatred, a flood of disbelief, a deluge of doubt, a torrent of resistance. Men scoffed, their laughter a bitter chord, a discord of doubt, a melody of disbelief, a harmony of rejection, a symphony of scorn, a chorus of disdain. Women turned away, their whispers a judgment, a murmur of rejection, a sigh of apathy, a breath of scorn, a cry of indifference, a voice of denial. Children stared with wide eyes, their innocence a contrast, their curiosity a hope, their silence a question, their gaze a plea, their hearts a wonder, their souls a light. Another prophet of doom, muttered a merchant, his hands busy with goods, his heart closed to grace, his soul deaf to truth, his spirit blind to light, his mind hardened to love, his faith lost to greed. We need warriors, not words, shouted a soldier, his armor clanking, his spirit hardened, his faith lost, his hope faded, his courage dimmed, his strength misplaced, his heart closed. Isaiah pressed on, his heart heavy, his spirit tested, his soul burdened, his resolve unshaken, his faith a rock, his love a flame, his hope a river, his strength a shield, his grace a light, his courage a song, his peace a refuge, his joy a gift, his perseverance a testament. Why do they reject me, Lord? He prayed each night, the flicker of his lamp a solitary light, a beacon in the dark, a flame in the storm, its glow a hope, its warmth a comfort, its presence a grace, its light a guide, its flame a love, its spark a promise, its radiance a strength, its heat a peace. What good is my voice if it falls on deaf ears? My call if it meets closed hearts? My cry if it meets silent souls? My hope if it meets blind eyes? My love, if it meets hardened spirits. My faith, if it meets unbelieving minds. My grace, if it meets unyielding wills. My peace, if it meets restless hearts. The silence that followed was not empty. It pulsed with a presence, a divine whisper that stirred his spirit, a breath that kindled his faith, a touch that lifted his hope, a voice that guided his path, a light that illuminated his darkness, a grace that sustained his strength, a love that filled his heart, a promise that held his soul, a strength that upheld his resolve, a peace that calmed his fear, a joy that lifted his spirit, a mercy that healed his wounds. One evening, as he sat in his small home, the scent of oil from his lamp mingling with the cool night air, a new vision came, a revelation that pierced the dark, a light that broke the silence, a hope that shattered the gloom, a love that healed the wound, a grace that restored the broken, a peace that calmed the storm, a joy that filled the void. He saw the servant again, now led to a hill, his body weak, his steps faltering. The crowds roar a tempest, their voices a thunder, their hatred a storm, their scorn a flood, their rejection a wave, their disbelief a tide, their anger a deluge. Isaiah's breath hitched as he witnessed the servant lifted onto a cross, nails driven through his hands, the sound a sickening thud, a clash of metal and flesh, a cry of pain, a wail of suffering, a groan of agony, a lament of loss, blood dripping to the earth, the air thick with the stench of death, a shroud of despair, a veil of sorrow, a curtain of loss, a shadow of pain, a mist of torment, a cloud of anguish. No more, Lord, Isaiah cried, his voice raw, his throat torn, his spirit broken, his heart a wound, his soul a lament, his faith a question, his hope a plea. This is too much to bear. Why must he die? Why this agony? Why this silence? Why this suffering? Why this loss? Why this pain? Why this rejection? Why this burden? Why this trial? The voice answered, its tone both tender and commanding, its strength a rock, its mercy a river, its love a light, its grace a hope, its power a promise, its wisdom a guide, its compassion a balm, its justice a truth, its peace a refuge, its joy a gift, its faith a strength. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Isaiah 53:5. The words a revelation, a burden, a hope, a call, a light, a truth, a grace, a love, a redemption, a peace, a joy, a salvation. Isaiah fell silent, the words sinking deep, their meaning a puzzle, their depth a mystery, their weight a grace, their truth a challenge, their promise a hope, their love a redemption, their peace a gift, their joy a blessing, their faith a light, their strength a rock. Healed by his wounds, peace through his punishment. How can suffering bring life? How can death yield hope? How can pain offer salvation? How can agony grant peace? How can loss bring redemption? How can sacrifice bring joy? How can love endure such torment? How can grace overcome such darkness? How can faith prevail in such trials? How can mercy shine in such despair? How can truth stand in such rejection? How can hope rise in such sorrow? The vision continued, and Isaiah saw the servant's body taken down, wrapped in cloth, laid in a tomb carved from rock, the stone rolled shut, the silence absolute, the darkness complete, the air heavy with finality, the earth still with death, the sky somber with loss, the night deep with sorrow, the void filled with grief. Yet, as night fell, a light emerged, faint at first, a glimmer in the void, a spark in the shadow, a flicker in the gloom, then blinding, a radiance that shattered the dark, a glory that pierced the night, a triumph that conquered the grave, a victory that silenced the silence, a hope that rose from the ashes, a love that conquered death. Impossible, Isaiah gasped, his hands clutching his chest, his breath a struggle, his spirit a tumult, his soul a cry, his heart a wonder, his faith a light, his hope a flame. Death defeated, life from the grave. What miracle is this? What promise lies here? What hope arises here? What love prevails here? What grace transforms here? What redemption dawns here? What salvation shines here? What joy emerges here? What peace endures here? The voice whispered, its tone a gentle breeze, its sound a grace, its depth a promise, its warmth a love, its clarity a light, its strength a refuge, its mercy a river, its peace a gift, its joy a hope, its faith a rock, its grace a shield. After the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Isaiah 53:11. The words, a revelation, a hope, a call, a promise, a truth, a light, a grace, a love, a redemption, a peace, a joy, a salvation, a fulfillment. Isaiah's tears fell freely, his mind reeling, his heart pounding, his soul lifted, his spirit renewed, his faith strengthened, his love deepened, his hope restored, his joy awakened, his peace affirmed, his grace embraced. A righteous servant, justifying many, bearing our iniquities. Who is this man, this Savior, this light, this hope, this love, this grace, this redemption, this promise, this fulfillment, this peace, this joy, this strength, this refuge? Days later, in the marketplace, Isaiah proclaimed his vision, his voice steady despite the jeers, his spirit resolute despite the scorn, his faith unshaken despite the doubt, his heart unbroken despite the pain, his soul unbowed despite the rejection, his love undimmed despite the hatred, his hope unquenched despite the despair. Hear me, O Judah, a servant will come, pierced for our sins, raised to bring us life, a light to dispel our darkness, a hope to lift our despair, a love to heal our wounds, a grace to redeem our souls, a peace to calm our storms, a joy to fill our hearts, a strength to uphold our faith. The crowd's response was a storm of anger, a tide of rejection, a wave of hatred, a flood of disbelief, a deluge of doubt, a torrent of resistance, a sea of scorn. Stones flew, their clatter a discord, their impact a wound. Insults rained, their words a venom. A young man spat. Madman, your visions are delusions, your words are lies, your hope is folly, your faith is madness, your love is weakness, your grace is foolishness, your peace is illusion. Jeremiah pulled him away, his voice urgent, his hands firm, his heart concerned, his soul a shield, his spirit a protector, his faith a support, his love a refuge. Isaiah, they will kill you if you persist. Why continue? Why endure? Why suffer? Why stand? Why hope? Why love? Why believe? Isaiah's eyes burned with conviction, a fire that would not fade. a light that would not dim, a flame that endured, a glow that persisted, a strength that prevailed, a love that conquered, a grace that triumphed. Because God has shown me a future beyond this pain, a future where death is not the end, where love triumphs over hate, where hope rises from despair, where grace prevails over sin, where light conquers darkness, where faith overcomes doubt, where peace reigns over chaos, where joy blossoms in sorrow, where strength lifts the fallen, where mercy heals the broken. I must speak, even if I stand alone, even if I walk in solitude, even if I bear the cross, even if I face the grave, even if I endure the scorn, even if I embrace the pain, even if I hold the hope. The rejection grew, even within his family. A wound that cut deeper than the crowd's scorn, a pain that pierced his spirit, a sorrow that weighed his heart, a burden that tested his love, a trial that challenged his faith, a loss that tested his grace. His cousin Eliab confronted him, his face hard, his voice sharp, his eyes cold, his spirit unyielding, his heart closed, his soul resistant, his mind darkened. Isaiah, your words shame us, your visions divide us, your mission ruins us, your faith destroys us, your hope confounds us, your love bewilders us, your grace perplexes us. Stop, or we are lost. Our name is tarnished, our lives are broken, our peace is shattered, our future is darkened, our spirits are crushed, our hope is extinguished. Isaiah's heart ached, a pain that pierced his soul, a wound that bled his love, a sorrow that filled his eyes, a burden that bowed his head, a trial that tested his strength. But he replied, his voice steady, his spirit firm, his resolve unshaken, his faith a rock, his love a flame, his hope a river. Eliab, I cannot silence God's truth, though it costs me all, though it breaks my heart, though it tears my family, though it shatters my peace, though it wounds my spirit, though it tests my faith, though it challenges my hope. I am bound by his call, guided by his light, strengthened by his love, sustained by his grace, lifted by his hope, carried by his peace, filled by his joy, upheld by his strength. Alone that night, he prayed, the flicker of his lamp a solitary light, a beacon in the dark, a flame in the storm, its glow a hope, its warmth a comfort, its presence a grace, its light a guide, its flame a love, its spark a promise, its radiance a strength, its heat a peace, its brilliance a joy. Lord, my heart breaks under their scorn, my spirit trembles under their rejection, my soul weeps under their disbelief, my faith wavers under their hatred, my love aches under their indifference, my hope falters under their doubt, my peace shudders under their scorn, my joy fades under their rejection. Give me strength, give me courage, give me faith, give me love, give me peace, give me hope, give me grace, give me joy, give me light. A vision followed, a light that pierced the gloom, a hope that rose from the ashes, a grace that healed the wound, a city rebuilt, its walls strong, its gates open, its towers high, its streets alive, its people singing, its voices a harmony, fields green with life, their scent a promise, their color a hope, their growth a miracle, their harvest a blessing, children laughing, their voices a melody, their joy a light, their innocence a prayer, their happiness a gift, men and women joyfully rebuilding, their hands a testament, their sweat a sacrifice, their effort a love, their labor a grace, their toil a hope. Laughter and songs echoed through the streets, their sound a grace, their rhythm a redemption, their harmony a peace, their melody a hope, their cadence a joy, their resonance a love. A gentle voice, almost like a whisper, filled the air, its tone a comfort, its depth a love, its clarity a promise, its warmth a hope, its strength a refuge, its mercy a river, its peace a gift, its joy a light, its faith a rock, its grace a shield. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to comfort all who mourn, to bestow a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Isaiah 61:1-3. The words a revelation, a light, a call, a promise, a grace, a hope, a love, a redemption, a peace, a joy, a strength, a refuge. Hope stirred within him, a seed in the ashes, a light in the dawn, a flame in the night, a strength in the trial, a love in the pain, a joy in the sorrow, a peace in the storm, a grace in the darkness, a faith in the wilderness, a mercy in the loss. Yet, the greatest revelation lingered, a mystery yet to unfold, a truth awaiting its time, a promise awaiting its fulfillment, a hope awaiting its dawn, a love awaiting its expression, a grace awaiting its manifestation, a redemption awaiting its realization, a salvation awaiting its completion, a peace awaiting its reign, a joy awaiting its song. Isaiah knew his journey was far from over, his words a bridge to a future he could only glimpse, his faith a lantern in the gathering dark, his spirit a guide in the storm, his heart a vessel of grace, his soul a beacon of hope, his life a testimony of love, his being a witness of truth, his path a light of redemption. The days grew heavier, the air thick with the scent of war, the sound of marching feet a drum of doom, the cries of the hungry a lament of despair, the wails of the widows a song of loss, the groans of the oppressed a cry for justice, the sighs of the weary a plea for peace, the whispers of the fearful a call for mercy, the prayers of the faithful a hope for grace. Isaiah walked the streets, his voice a cry in the wilderness, his presence a light in the shadow, his step a witness, his breath a prayer, his heart a sacrifice, his soul a offering, his spirit a flame, his love a river. Turn back, O Judah, to the God who saves. For a servant comes to bear your sins, to bring you peace, to offer you redemption, to grant you life, to fill you with hope, to surround you with love, to lift you with grace, to guide you with light, to strengthen you with faith. The people turned away, their hearts hardened, their ears closed, their eyes blind, their spirits deaf, their souls resistant, their minds darkened, their wills unyielding. Yet Isaiah pressed on, his faith a rock, his hope a river, his love a flame, his strength a shield, his grace a light, his courage a song, his peace a refuge, his joy a gift, his perseverance a testament, his endurance a grace. One night, as he knelt in prayer, the wind howling through the open window, its chill a reminder of the trials ahead, its force a call to endurance, its sound a lament, its breath a challenge, its gust a judgment, its roar a cry. A new vision came, a revelation that shook his soul, a light that broke the darkness, a hope that shattered the silence, a love that healed the wound, a grace that restored the broken, a peace that calmed the storm, a joy that filled the void, a strength that lifted the fallen. He saw the servant again, his body broken on the cross, his blood a river, its flow a sacrifice, its depth a love, his silence a testimony, his suffering a redemption, his pain a grace, his agony a hope, his loss a light. Yet, from the tomb, a light burst forth, a resurrection that defied death, a triumph that silenced the grave, a victory that conquered the night, a glory that pierced the shadow, a joy that lifted the soul, a peace that reigned supreme. My God, Isaiah whispered, his voice a tremor, his breath a prayer, his heart a cry, his soul a wonder, his spirit a light, his faith a song, his love a river. This is the Messiah, the one who saves, the one who redeems, the one who fulfills all prophecy, the one who brings light, the one who offers hope, the one who embodies love, the one who grants peace, the one who restores grace, the one who proclaims joy, the one who upholds strength, the one who offers refuge. The journey continued, a path of pain and promise, a road of suffering and hope, a story yet to be fully told, a tale yet to be completed, a destiny yet to be revealed, a future yet to be embraced, a love yet to be fulfilled, a grace yet to be realized, a redemption yet to be witnessed, a salvation yet to be celebrated.